so on the point today, China has issued a white paper on food security, the second of its kind since 1996. The white paper, titled Food Security in China, was released by the State Council Information Office on Monday and highlights food security as a top priority for the country. The paper details China's achievements in feeding a population of 1.4 billion before going on to outline how it will secure food for its vast population in the future. So just what achievements have been made and what challenges lie ahead? Joining me now for the discussion on our program, Professor Tang Lixia, Deputy Dean of the China Institute for South-South Cooperation in Agriculture at China Agricultural University, and Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization. Welcome to the program.
Thank
China
you.
prides itself on being able to feed 1.4 billion people. So for a lot of people, city dwellers at least, the concept of food security is an unfamiliar one. Professor Tang, I want to start with you. Help us understand this concept of food security. And in other words, how insecure could we possibly be with food?
Yeah, I think the food security, if we discussed from academically, is very complicated. But if we just simplify to understand, is I think at least it includes two meanings. The first one is about quantity. It means we have to provide enough food to feed our people. The second meaning is about quality. It means the people can eat cheaply but well and healthily. I think the food security issue is very important. It's also quite easy to understand because food security is a kind of basic need of a human being. And in China, food security issue is always be put as a top priority just because we have the largest population in the world.
Victor, we had the first such paper back in 1996, and this second edition now. What key messages do you think this second white paper includes?
Well, first of all, the Chinese population has been growing over the past 20 years or so and reaching 1.4 billion people, as you said. And secondly, not only the sheer size of the demand has increased, but also the mix of the demand is also changing very rapidly. For example, the consumption of meat as a percentage has increased significantly. The consumption of dairy products, milk, for example, has also increased very significantly. Further, because of the urbanization, the Chinese cities and towns have expanded, making a big squeeze on the arable land, for example. So the government really needs to do a juggling job to make sure that there is a minimum amount of arable land under cultivation and not to be taken away by urbanization, for example. And also, we need to really accommodate the changing nature, rapidly changing nature, and the mixture of all these food composition. And I think also to balance domestic production versus imported grains and agricultural products. So I think this is really a hefty amount of job, and no single country elsewhere in the world will have such a daunting task of balancing.
A much more hefty job than a lot of people would imagine. It's not exactly a walk in the park to be able to feed that many people with the amount of arable land that China has. Victor, I want to continue on to ask you, what kind of achievements has China been able to do in the past couple of decades?
Well, first of all, China's national food security level is at about 95%, if not even higher. This is very much of a great achievement. No other government, no other country in the world can do that.
When you say food security level, elaborate on that.
That means, for example, for the grains, for the main staple food that the Chinese people normally consume, 95% are produced inside China.
Okay.
And this means that the Chinese agriculture need to achieve a minimum target. And below this target, the Chinese as a government, the Chinese as a nation will not feel secure, because if China is hit by, for example, a natural disaster or a huge shortage of, for example, one particular kind of foodstuff, no other country can supply the demand in China to the full satisfaction. So President Xi Jinping has mentioned again and again that the Chinese people need to control the minimum amount of food that the people here in this country consume. And this really is the pressure and the challenge for the agriculture industry as a whole in China.
And Professor Tang, I want to get your take on this set of numbers and how China has been able to do just that. The white paper listed a set of figures to demonstrate China's food security. For instance, grain production has stabilized at 650 million tons a year since 2015, and the output in 2018 was nearly 660 million tons, an increase of more than 30% since 1996, and nearly 6 times that in 1949. How was that possible?
Yeah, it's not an easy job for China, as
Definitely not.
Victor has mentioned. We have urbanization, we have industrialization, but we have got this achievement. So I'm very proud of our government and our people. When we talk about why China can achieve this target, we always see there are at least 3 elements. But today I would like to add another one: the consistent commitment and persistence. The first element is about policy. So everybody knows that the China government every year released the central #1 documents to lead our agricultural development. It means the agricultural issue is always at the top priority of our policy system. The second element is about input. Chinese government has invested a huge financial resource to encourage our farmers to continue to cultivate food crops. And also invest huge money to improve our agricultural infrastructure. For example, irrigation system, the rural roads, and also the processing system and the warehouse system in rural areas. And the third one is about the technology. So in today, the white paper also mentioned this, the science and the technology contribution rate in agriculture has reached at 58.3% in 2018. It means the gap between China and other developed countries has becoming less and less. And not only the traditional agricultural technology developed quite fast in China, and also some new high technology like artificial intelligence and the big data and the GIS also has been widely used in China. The last one, but not least, is I have mentioned the persistent commitment, because in China we maintain this high food self-sufficiency rate. It's very challenges to China. We have to urbanization, the fast population growth, and also economic growth, and the dire structural changes. And the most important is we only have limited land resource and water resource in the world. So I think, yeah, it's very important.
Victor, you talked about this already, that 95% of security, food security level. I want to put these numbers up for our viewers. China's self-sufficient rate for grain exceeds 95%, as you mentioned. And among total grain imports from 2001 to 2018, the total rations of rice and wheat accounted for less than 6%, while soybeans accounted for over 75%. That's over 2/3. What has led to this situation, and especially when soybeans can get caught up in the trade war between China and the United States? Are there alternatives?
Oh, absolutely. I think China is the biggest importer of soybean, and the Chinese nation as a whole is the biggest consumer of soybean milk, for example, all kinds of soybean-related products. And for the United States try to launch this trade war against China, definitely it will result in detriment to the American farmers, because no other country can import as much soybean as China can. So if China suspends import from the United States of soybean, the soybean farmers in the United States will suffer. So the logical thing to do is for China and the United States to really shake hands with each other and to make sure that the American farmers' fundamental interests are not detrimentally impacted upon, and China and the United States can really engage in more meaningful and mutually beneficial trade, including in soybean trade. And I think this is also deliberately a policy done by the Chinese government, because we do not want to have a very huge trading balance with the United States. We want to buy as much from the United States as possible, and going forward, not only as much as possible soybeans, for example, but also other food products from the United States. And I think this time, when the Chinese delegation and the American delegation, as witnessed by President Trump in Washington, agreed to have a much more increased amount of Chinese import of American agricultural products, I hope this will give confidence to the American people, to the American farmers, so that they will realize that China is not an enemy. China is really a friend, a partner that we can do business with for mutual benefit.
Well, given the recent progress on the trade talks, I think it's U.S. farmers who give a sigh of relief, however temporary that might be, with their businesses. Well, we don't have a lot of time left in the program. I want to ask this one last question to both of you. China has also been helping other parts of the world with their food security by sending experts and technicians to different countries. Your take, Professor Tang, on what China has done to help the international community in this regard?
Yeah, I think in past several decades, China has provided a lot of support to develop other developing countries to develop their agricultural production capacity via our bilateral channel, and we use the FAO and other multilateral mechanisms, and also under the China-Africa Forum, China-Latin America Forum, we have done a lot to promote the South-South cooperation in agricultural sector. I think China also can share our experience for agricultural development with other developing countries.
Victor, last remarks from you?
Well, definitely, China can share our experiences with many countries, especially developing countries. For example, our national hero, Yuan Longping, the father of hybrid rice, for example, he has been promoting his special seed of hybrid rice, not only in China with great success, but also in many other developing countries, in South Asia, for example, in Middle East, and
in Africa.
Absolutely. The achievements are really widely recognized as a great blessing for saving mankind in terms of supplying food for the huge amount of masses of the people in the world.
All right, we'll leave you there. Professor Tang, Victor, thank you so much for your analysis today. A pleasure to have you on. And before we go, just a quick message about a special episode of The Point, which will be streamed live on social media this Friday. Poverty alleviation is one of China's crowning achievements. But what have you heard about how the Chinese have achieved this? Maybe nothing if you've not been following Chinese news closely. Find out all about it by watching our Headlines Busting show this Friday, where we'll look for the truth behind the headlines. You can find more details and leave your comments, which will be shown on the screen by visiting our Facebook, Twitter, and Weibo pages. And don't forget to download the CGTN app. And that is The Point for today. I'm Zhongshi in Beijing.